Hello viewers, in this video lecture, today we are going to talk about the module Fundamentals of Energy Science. In this, today we will deal with lecture 2, Indian and World Energy Scenario. In the previous lecture, you have learnt about energy sources. So viewers, here are the important topics which will be discussed in this video. First will be introduction, classification of energy, global primary energy consumption, energy distribution between developed countries and developing countries, Indian energy scenario, energy supply, coal supply, oil supply, natural gas supply, electrical energy supply, nuclear power supply, hydropower supply. Now, we will discuss in details energy scenario of India and world. Introduction. Energy is one of the major inputs for the economic development of any country. In the case of developing countries, energy sector assumes a critical importance in view of the ever-increasing energy needs requiring huge investment to meet them. It is a capacity to do work. Energy is one of the major inputs for the economic development of any country. Fossil fuels like coal, oil and natural gas are the main source of energy. The electricity sector in India had an installed capacity of 267 gigawatt as the end of March 2015. India becomes the world's third largest producer of electricity in the year 2013. During the financial year 14 and 15, the electricity generated is 1030 billion kilowatt hour with a shortfall of requirement by 38 billion kilowatt hour. Classification of energy. Energy is one of the major inputs for the economic development of any country. In the case of developing countries, the energy sector assumes a critical importance in the view of ever-increasing energy needs requirement, huge investment to meet them. Energy can be classified into several types based on the following criteria: primary and secondary energy, commercial and non-commercial energy, renewable and non-renewable energy. Now, global primary energy consumption. The development of the electric energy chain of supply has evolved, moving from a differentiated analysis to an integral one of the generation, transmission and distribution phases are the final use. Future development trends of the electric network regarding planning and operation must consider the synergy existing between each phase of energy chain. The global primary energy consumption at the end of 2003 was equivalent to 9,741 million tons of the oil. The figure shows the worldwide energy consumption trend between 1965 to 2035. It is evident that the diverse energy sources, there is a high consumption of limited and non-renewable energy sources like oil, carbon and gas, which determine the production of capital goods competitiveness. The figure shows in what proportions the sources mentioned above contributed to this global figure. Global primary energy consumption. The primary energy consumption for few of the developed and developing countries are shown in table 1.1. It may be seen that India's absolutely primary energy consumption is only 1/29th of the world, 1/7th of USA and 1/6th time of Japan, but 1.1, 1.3 and 1.5 times that of Canada, France and UK respectively. It is depicted in figure. The energy distribution between developed and developing countries. Although 80% of the world's population lies in developing countries, a four-fold population increase in past 25 years. Their energy consumption amounts to only 40% of the world's total energy consumption. The high standards of living in the developed countries are attributed to high energy consumption levels. Also, the rapid population growth in the developing countries has kept the per capita energy consumption low compared with the highly industrialized developed countries. The world average energy consumption per person is equivalent to 2.2 tons of coal. In industrialized countries, people use 4 to 5 times more than the world average and 9 times more than the average of developing countries. An American uses 32 times more commercial energy than an Indian. It is shown in figure 1.1, energy distribution between developed countries and developing countries. Coming to Indian energy scenario. Coal dominates the energy mix in India, contributing to 55% of the total primary energy production. Over the years, there has been a marked increase in the share of natural gas in primary energy production from 10% in 1994 to 13% in 1999. There has been a decline in the share of oil in primary energy production from 20% to 17% during the same period. The electricity sector in India has an installed capacity of 267 gigawatts as the end of March 2015. During the fiscal year 14 and 15, the electricity generated is 1030 billion kilowatt hour with a shortfall of the requirement by 38. India has richest deposits of coal in the world. Total estimated reserves of the coal as on 2022 was 361 billion tons, an addition of 9.28 billion tons over the corresponding period of previous years. In terms of percentage, there has been a growth of 2.64% in the total estimated coal reserves during the year 2021 and 22 over 2021. It is shown in table 1.1. The top 3 stages with highest coal reserves in India are Odisha, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, which account for approximately 69% of the total coal reserves in the country. Out of the total reserves in the country, proven reserves, that is, those available for extraction in terms of economical viability, feasible study and geologically exploration level, account for almost 52% of the total as depicted below in the figure. Energy supply, coal supply. India has huge coal reserves at least 84,396 million tons of proven recoverable reserves. This amounts to almost 8.6% of the world's reserves, and it may last for about 230 years at the current reserves to the production ratio. In contrast, the world's proven coal reserves are expected to last only for 192 years at the current RP ratio. Reserves production ratio, that is R by P ratio. If the reserves remaining at the end of the year are divided by the production in that year, the result is length of time that the remaining reserves would last if production were to continue at that level. India is the 4th largest producer of coal and lignite in the world. Coal production is concentrated in these states: Andhra Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Odisha, Jharkhand, West Bengal. Oil supply. Oil accounts for about 36% of India's total energy consumption. India today is one of the top 10 oil guzzling nations in the world, and will soon overtake Korea as the third largest consumer of oil in Asia after China and Japan. The country's annual crude oil production is peaked at about 32 million tonnes as against the current peak demand of about 110 million tonnes. In the current scenario, India's oil consumption by the end of 2007 is expected to reach 136 million tonnes, of which domestic production will be only 34 million tonnes. India will have to pay an oil bill of roughly $50 billion, assuming a weighted average price of $50 per barrel of crude. In 2003 and 4, against total export of $64 billion, oil imports accounted for $21 billion. India imports 70% of its crude needs mainly from Gulf nations. Natural gas supply. Natural gas accounts for about 8.9% of energy consumption in the country. The current demand for natural gas is about 96 million cubic meter per day, as against availability of 67 cubic meter per day million. By 2007, the demand is expected to be around 200 MCMD. Natural gas reserves are estimated at 660 billion cubic meters. Now, next we have is electrical energy supply. The All India installed capacity of electric power generating stations under utilities was 1,12,581 megawatts, consisting of 28,860 megawatts hydro, 77,931 megawatts thermal and 2,720 megawatts nuclear and 18,069 megawatts wind, Ministry of Wind Power. The gross generation of power stood at 531 billion units, kilowatt per hour. Nuclear power supply. Nuclear power contributes to about 2.4% of electricity generated in India. India has 10 nuclear power reactors at 5 nuclear power stations producing electricity. More nuclear reactors have also been approved for construction. Hydropower supply. India is endowed with a vast and viable hydro potential of power generation, of which only 15% has been harnessed so far. The share of hydropower in the country's total generated units has steadily decreased and it presently stands at 25% as on 2004. It is assessed that exploitable potential at 60% load factor is 84,000 megawatts. Final energy consumption. Final energy consumption is the actual energy demanded at the user end. This is the difference between primary energy consumption and the losses that takes place in the transport, transmission and distribution and refinement. The actual final energy consumption is given in the table 2, sector-wise energy consumption in India. The major commercial energy consuming sectors in the country are classified as shown in the figure. As seen from the figure, industry remains the biggest consumer of commercial energy and its share in the overall consumption is 49%. Energy needs of growing economy. Economic growth is desirable for developing countries and energy is essential for economic growth. However, the relationship between economic growth and increased energy demand is not always straightforward linear one. The energy industry contributes to economic growth in 2 ways. First, energy is an important sector for the economy that creates job and value by extracting, transforming and distributing energy goods and services throughout the economy. Second, energy underpins the rest of the economy. In this context, the ratio of energy demand to GDP is a useful indicator. A high ratio reflects energy dependence and a strong influence of energy on GDP growth. The developed countries, by focusing on energy efficiency and lower energy intensive routes, maintain their energy to GDP ratio at values of less than 1. The ratio for developing countries are much higher. India's energy needs. The plan outline of energy is given in figure. Expenditure towards energy sector. As seen from the figure, 18% of the total 5-year plan outlay is spent on energy sector. Per capita energy consumption. The per capita energy consumption shown in figure is too low for India as compared to developing countries. It is just 4% of USA and 20% of the world's average. The per capita consumption is likely to grow in India with growth in economy, thus increasing the energy demand. Energy intensity. Energy intensity is the energy consumption per unit of GDP. Energy intensity indicates the development stage of the country. India's energy intensity is 3.7 times of Japan, 1.55 times of USA, and 1.5 times of world's average. Long-term energy scenario for India. Coal. Coal is the predominant energy resource of power production in India, generating approximately 70% of total domestic electricity. Energy demand in India is expected to increase over the next 10 to 15 years. Although new oil and gas plants are planned, coal is expected to remain dominant fuel for power generation. Despite significant increase in total installed capacity during the last decade, the gap between electricity supply and demand continues to increase. Oil. India's demand for petroleum products is likely to rise from 97.7 million tons in 2001 and 2 to around 139 million tons in 6 to 7, according to projections of the 10-5-year plan. The plan document puts compound annual growth rate at 3.6% during the plan period. As shown in the figure, around 92% of India's total oil demand by 2020 has to be made by imports. Natural gas. India's natural gas production is likely to rise from 86.56 million in 2002-03 to 1.3 million. It is mainly based on the strength of a more than doubling of production by private operators to 38.25 billion cubic meter electricity. Long-term demand forecast presents the first step in planning and developing future generation, transmission and distribution facilities. One of the primary tasks of electric utility accuracy always predicts loud demand requirements, especially for long term. India currently has peak demand storage of around 14% and an energy deficit of 8.4%. Keeping this in view and to maintain a GDP gross domestic product growth of 8% to 10%, individual state grids were interconnected to form 5 regional grids covering mainland India. The grids were northern, eastern, western, northeastern and southern grids. The first interconnection of regional grids was established in October 1991 when the northeastern and eastern grids were interconnected. The western grids was interconnected with the grids. The northern grid was also interconnected in August 2006, forming a central grid synchronously connected, operating at one frequency. The sole remaining regional grid, the southern grid, was synchronously interconnected to central grid on December 2013 with the commissioning of 765 kilowatts. Raichur Solapur transmission line, thereby establishing the natural grid. Total installed capacity of coal washeries in India is 152.31 million tons per year as on the year 2022. This comprises of 37 MTY in cooking and 115 MTY in non-cooking coal washeries. This is shown in table 2.1. Similarly, as on 2022, there were a total of 23 refineries in the country, 19 in the public sector and 4 in the private sector and joint venture, that is shown in table. The refining capacity of country is 2,51,216 TMTPA on 2021, which is 2000 TMTPA more than from the last year. Public sector refineries have dominance of over 60% of the total capacity in India. The refinery production crude throughput achievement was 2,21,773 TMT during 20 and 21, which has increased to 2,41,703 TMT during 2001 and 2002. That is a net increase of 9% over 20 and 21. Hence, the overall capacity utilization of the refineries, which was 88.7% during 20 and 21, has increased to 96.9% in 21 and 22. In the public sector, Indian Oil Corporation increased its capacity utilization from 89% to 96%. The private and joint ventures have also experienced positive growth rate of 8.17 during financial year 21 and 22. In absolute terms, the installed capacity of electricity generation increased by 4.6% to 4,82,232 megawatt in 21-22 with 4,60,659 megawatts in 20 and 21, with a major share of installed capacity existing with the utilities, that is 82.84%. It is also shown in table 2.3. Let us summarize what we have learned today. We have learned the concept of classification of energy, global primary energy consumption, energy distribution between developed and developing countries, Indian energy scenario, present energy scenario, energy supply, coal supply, oil supply, natural gas supply, electrical energy supply, nuclear power supply and hydro power supply. So, I suppose you must have had a good learning experience watching this video. So, keep watching and enjoy learning. Thank you.